Do you have a husband who struggles to stay gentle with your children and tends to go off on them and raise his voice and yell often? Let's dig in. Leslie Wells, Connection Coach here. I help individuals earn secure attachment, and I help people repair, improve their marriages by digging into things from an attachment lens. So a lot of times these men that we're talking about are dismissive avoidance, meaning that in childhood they had parents that, particularly their father, and they will tend to carry this father wound, who was maybe a good present father, took them places, took them and was active in their sports, spent time with them, but they weren't very emotionally tuned. And so they weren't able to help their son whenever they actually needed help, when they had big emotions. They were upset, sad, angry, fearful, jealous, whatever it was. They would sort of never modeled emotions themselves. And whenever their child would have emotions, they would tell them, suck it up, buttercup, shake it off if you get hurt. Oh, if you're going to cry, I'll give you something to cry about. They were very more authoritarian versus nurturing. And one of the biggest examples that comes to mind for me is how many men are, and it's kind of a joke, but it's also damaging, is the men who were constantly yelled at for not holding the flashlight, right? That's a perfect example. The father is spending time with the son. They're doing something together. He is teaching them something, but he also is extremely harsh, and he's yelling, and he's not really caring about the impact that he has on his child emotionally. So he's constantly yelling at the child, making the child feel like they're not doing something right. They can't get it right. They're not doing enough. And although that seems like a small thing, a whole childhood of that, those things build up over time, and that person does not learn how to deal with their emotions. They learn to stuff them down, just distract from them, suppress them, and that becomes a problem. The other thing with these types of parents is they usually do not allow their children to have a voice. It is viewed as a sign of disrespect whenever their child does try to speak up and explain how they feel about something, or if they feel like something is unfair or unjust. So one of the things that I try to do in my house with my two boys is make sure that they are allowed to express how they feel, and that we sit with them when they have their emotions. So they can be mad at us, they can be upset with us, they can feel like a consequence is not fair, and they are allowed to vocalize that and verbalize that. The key is they have to do that respectfully. They cannot raise their voice, they cannot use words that are unkind, they cannot do it in a disrespectful manner, but they do have a voice. And the reason that we do this is because we want them to get used to expressing themselves, identifying and processing their feelings, and being able to verbalize that. Because guess what? One day they're going to grow up and they're going to get married, and if they're unable to do that in their marriage, there's going to be issues. And a lot of you are experiencing those issues. Or they're not going to be able to model those things and help their children through those things. So let's say that you have a husband who grew up like that. He was not a lot of voice. If he did speak up, it was considered disrespectful, and he was either met with harsh words back, he was yelled at, or he was spanked, corrected, punished for actually having emotions and trying to express how he feels. So you have this person who grows up kind of powerless around somebody older than them, stronger than them. That can be scary and intimidating at times. And they learn very quickly they do not have a voice. As you can imagine, that plays out in the relationship with their wife when the wife comes to them to have a conversation, or there's conflict and they just sit there quietly because they're so accustomed to not being able to speak their mind, their desires, their wishes, their wants, their struggles. But it also shows up with your children. So same thing, if a child learned very young that it's disrespectful to speak up, and they therefore learn that they have no voice, no right to speak, and that feels disrespectful. Even to a young boy, the need for respect is built into men. We are designed that way. That's actually ties back to scripture. So as a young boy, they still feel like there's a complete lack of respect if no one cares how they feel, what they think, what they want to say, what's going on with them. That is just disrespect. And so as they get older and have children, when their children are not obeying, not listening, they go back to that sense of helplessness and powerless and feeling like they do not have a voice and they are not being respected. And the only way that they know how to address that is the same way that their dad did. By yelling, by getting harsher, by getting bigger, by getting and going into this sort of authoritarian figure, instead of actually being able to de-escalate the situation and have a conversation. And if a conversation isn't going to work because you've already had several conversations, then you can just give a quick consequence immediately that's already been discussed without actually having to raise your voice, get bigger, yell. But I think a lot of the yelling, and some dads get to the point where they're doing this very quickly. It doesn't take very much to sort of have them fly off the handle because they constantly feel like their children are not respecting them every time they're not listening. And of course, that's, personalizing a situation when kids often are just kids. If you've told a child to stop, your children to stop wrestling on the couch 40 times, kids have to hear things over and over again, and they have a lack of self-control. And so sometimes instead of saying something 40 times after the first time, it's okay, here we go. You're not allowed to sit on the couch anymore, your butt's sit on the floor. But a lot of times when a dad will just go to the place where they said it once, then they'll just go into this big display where they're automatically yelling and they're upset and they're frustrated, and the kid's like, what in the heck happened? And then the kids feel disrespected the same way as the father did when he was a child. Like, he had no voice, nobody cared how he felt, and they feel disrespected. And so a lot of this comes back to the father just feeling like when the kids are disrespecting him, he's still that little boy that does not have a voice, does not have any control, and has to sit there and take the same disrespect from his kids that he had to then take at that time when he was a child from his father. If this resonates with any of you men who are dads who do notice that you do this and you're trying to work on it, then please put something in the comments.